Okay, so my article is about sensory discrimination, which is basically when you do or don't register a visual or auditory cue, like a flashing light or a tone with a certain pitch, like those hearing tests they would give in elementary school and middle school. So the authors of the article were Wilsh et al., which they were just a group of scientists who were featured in the Journal of Neuroscience a few times. That's all the information I could really find on them. And they wanted to see if there were certain stimuli that disrupted the process, believing that certain stimuli could override or distract from another. These people were kind of a mess, and their experiment was also a mess, so I decided to kind of recreate it and redo it, but instead of people, I used cats. So the first thing that Wilsh et al. Failed to do was kind of establish a good profile of their participants. They only really listed they were all females, they were all within a certain age range, and they were all right-handed and a few other random things. They did not include ethnic backgrounds, races, or other things you should add in a profile. So to demonstrate that, I decided to recreate my own profiles, which will include females from ages 1 to 4, and including stuff like their race and their ethnic background, but not economic because these are cats and the most money experience they have is knocking a coin on the floor. So here we have our participants: Willow, Ivy, Kitty, Scotch, and Butters. They're all wonderful. So our experiment will be similar to the original one. In the original one, they had about blocks of 12 trials for each person a few times a day, but I'm only going to do 4 total trials for the cats, just 2 auditory and 2 visual, because I have a life outside of this project. And now we have our stimuli, so we'll have the target stimuli, which is the one we want them to pay attention to, which will be the jingle ball and the sloth for the visual and auditory. And then for the disruptive ones, we'll have a bag of cat treats for the audio and a colorful fish for the visual. And the disruptive stimuli is the one they're going to try to get distracted by. Here's a little overview of the trials. The cat will first be presented by the ball by itself, and once the cat pays attention to that, they'll be presented with both stimuli, which I'll jingle the ball and shake the treats at the same time, and see which one they look at first. The visual is pretty much the same thing, except with the fish and the sloth, and then we'll see which they look at first, and I'll do both twice. So a small side note is that in the original study, the participants were hooked up to an EEG so that they could measure when and what they first paid attention to. I am broke, I am a college student, so I don't have one. The cats kind of just looking or reacting to something will take the place of that. And another strong strength of the original study was that how they had pages and pages of data from their study, and I don't want to make 16 graphs, so I won't be recreating that part. So here's Willow doing the trials. You see her looking at the sloth first and reacting to the treats first. We have our results for each one. I don't want to read them all. Here's a graph kind of just showing the different reactions and how frequently they reacted to things. And as you can see from the results, if I left it on there long enough, oh well, we'll pretend I did. They were all distracted by at least one stimulus that took their attention away from the target stimulus. And surprisingly, these findings were similar to those of Wilsh et al., who found that people were also easily distracted from target stimuli, which does prove that sensory discrimination does exist. They did not list any weaknesses of their study. So to kind of demonstrate how that should be done, I kind of wrote down some of my own weaknesses of the study. Like the sloth is Willow's favorite toy, so she'd probably choose that. I can't measure their brain activity, and mainly cats are generally uninterested in science, and they weren't too interested in working with me on this. And another big thing they failed to do in the original study was have a peer review it, someone who was outside of their organization. So they never got an outside view to kind of demonstrate that. It's like putting Ivy in a little hat to make her look smarter and telling her to review her own experiments. And that doesn't really give you an outside perspective, and due to this, they did miss out on potentially discovering faults or strengths in their findings. So to kind of demonstrate peer review done right, because this needs to be longer, I made a review board of individuals outside the institution, which is going to be cats for this, and someone who's outside the institution can offer better unbiased criticism. It's more helpful to a study, even though Ivy is adorable in her little hat. So here's our review board of people outside of cats. We got dogs, we got a pony, we got horses. It's great. And Wilsh et al. Never said if they planned to extend their research and ended their experiment with a conclusion made up of their results. Since I already gave the results, my experiment ended with the cats being given treats. I also don't intend to do further research as I am done with this project and the semester is over and cats are pretty unreliable, even though I love them.